We have arrived at the third and final portion of the lecture. First, we're going to analyze La Calavera Eléctrica, and then we'll close with reflections on Posada's legacy. So by now, you have so much context to analyze a broadsheet like this one. As you now know, this would have been widely distributed, and it's a loose leaf that includes not only an engraving, but it also includes decorations, as this stenciling here. He chooses the font, and he also works in collaboration with a poet, and together they come up with these verses. This broadsheet is called Gran Calavera Eléctrica, or the Great Electric Skull, from 1907. So I want to tell you what these verses say in the context of analyzing the imagery. So we're going to take a closer look at this. And here it is printed on a different color sheet. But here's the broadsheet so you can see the context, and this is what we're going to look at. First of all, let me translate this because it will help you to understand the imagery. It says, Gran Calavera Eléctrica, Great Electric Skull, ¿qué se les va a regalar? That will be given to you all. Calavera muy fachosa de pura electricidad. Very ridiculous skull with pure electricity. And obviously I put the translation for you. Oh, I didn't translate this one. El 1 de noviembre, como diablos correrán. Los eléctricos vagones que a dolores llegarán. So he's talking about various things here. He's talking about the 1st of November, which clearly refers to the Day of the Dead, or El Día de los Muertos. And then how the devil are they going to run to get to Dolores? And Dolores is a play on words because Dolores means pains, but it's also the name of the main cemetery in Mexico. And he's saying here, how the devil are they going to run these electric wagons directly to Dolores? So he's making fun of this whole thing about regarding yes, you're going to go faster, but where are you going? To the cemetery. And over here, he did it's a very irreverent, this is what he thinks about it. He made a little dog peeing on the whole thing. And now here you understand that this skull standing is already beaming electricity. And even though the skull and skeleton is full of electricity, he's still nothing but a skull. And this skull is talking to these other ones, and it's actually making a connection, like this skull is transmitting all the electricity. And to understand this, you have to think back on what we discussed earlier in the lecture. All that business regarding order and progress, and this desire to bring all the modern things that the world has to offer to Mexico. And Mexico becomes absolutely modernity itself. Because from the moment Posada was a child until the 1900s, things have changed dramatically. It was such a different world, and the change was rather fast as well. But I think, at least for me, the commentary here is not just the change and the fact that these wagons came just like the train that I showed you earlier in the Velasco paintings. This train is actually transporting people super fast. But the joke is you're still just going to the cemetery here. And something else that we could comment on would be the fact that Posada is saying it will be given to you. I don't know, should we believe this? What will be the externalities associated with electricity? And above all, will electricity really be given to everyone? That has not been the case with everything else. In Mexico in the late 19th century, things were being partitioned and many people lost their lands, for example, and they were emerging here in Mexico from a very unjust system. So then we have to reflect about this elation and fascination with electricity. I told you that I lived in Mexico from 2011 to 2012, and I had this lady from Oaxaca helping me. And it was one of the best things because she guided me so well with everything that I had to do. And she had a child the same age as I did, so the kids played all the time. And then one time I asked her how to pay the electric bill the first day, the first month that I was there. She had no idea how to help me. And this is because, as astounding as it may sound, not everyone in Mexico in the 21st century has access to electricity in Mexico City. So think about that when you analyze this artwork. And now, to close the lecture, I will offer some reflections on Posada's artistic legacy. His renown is undoubted. The Mexican post office in the 20th century honored this master of engraving with commemorating stamps. And in this postage, Posada is doubly honored because this postage stamp features Posada, but this is not Posada depicting himself. Rather, is the artist Leopoldo Méndez, who created this linocut in 1953. In the series honoring Posada the artist, Correos Mexicanos included this image, which is a really stunning portrayal that really captures the essence of José Guadalupe Posada. First of all, Méndez made this in 1953, but he inserted the date here, 1902, which is the year that the artist Leopoldo Méndez was born. That happens to be when unrest begins in opposition to the Porfiriato. 1902 would be the year when activities pointing to a revolution are getting stronger. Leopoldo Méndez depicts here the celebrated artist José Guadalupe Posada as an idealistic portrayal. Nevertheless, I think it's a very realistic one and really captures different aspects of Posada, the person and the artist, because the image is not depicting one thing that the artist is doing. Again, it encapsulates everything that Posada was all about. Let me explain. Posada is seen here holding his burin and working on an engraving. He is taking a break to look out the window. And what he sees is a federales whacking and attacking peasants and indigenous peoples. You see people with sombreros and wearing very traditional outfits, evoking the story that you just heard from the Mexican Revolution, evoking that story that I just told you from the Porfiriato and Mexican Revolution. And this is precisely the way that what Posada's method is, observing life as it unfolds outside, and that's what he's recording here. And the other theme that it encapsulates, the fact that not only is he working as an artist, but he's also working in the printing shop. And here in the scene within the print shop, we see the Mogon brothers, Ricardo here in the front, holding a loose leaf in a text that actually evokes this unrest. And perhaps because Méndez is an artist who deeply understood what Posada was doing in his process, it's showing that Posada was always working with his burin. But as he was doing that, he was watching the action outside to report it with the rest of the people who worked in the print shop. And they're coming up together to report on the events happening outside. This is precisely what he did, to denounce these sort of tragedies, to denounce this injustice. And this fourth unidentified man, at least I don't know who he is actually working on the typeset that is going to bring us and the people of Mexico the unfolding of these events that wouldn't otherwise be told. And here's another example of a stamp from the series on Posada by Correos Mexicanos. This one is of an engraving from a broadsheet by Posada. This one featuring Don Quixote attacking all the liars. It says here on this verse. And this one to me is so full of meaning because Don Quixote was an hidalgo, someone from the upper class. And yet he read so much that he began to attack all the evils of the world like this. And he was very idealistic. And of course, this novel by Miguel de Cervantes Saavedra, published, the first part published in 1605 and then the second one in 1615, is one of the most influential pieces in world literature and emerges during the Spanish Golden Age. And I cannot leave this one piece out. El suceso del baile de los 41. It refers to an event that occurred in 18 November 1901. There was a party in a very affluent neighborhood. And in violation of civil liberties, the police came in and arrested most people because they were doing some things that they considered indecent. Because among the attendees, there were cross-dressers. Now, reportedly, one of the men in attendance was President Porfirio Díaz's son-in-law. And while most of the attendees were arrested and punished, Porfirio Díaz tried everything in his power to prevent the story from leaking out. Nevertheless, it was widely published in the press. And here's Posada's rendition of the event. And as the illustrious thinker of our generation, Carlos Monsiváis, sadly he already passed away, said that this episode invented homosexuality in Mexico. And what that means is that it is depicting events in the lives of a group that is denied a space in our society. But the homophobia in Mexico was so high, was so great, that I've heard that 41 became a non-desirable number that people would skip. It's a little bit like our number 13 here in the United States, that people say like, we're going to the 13th floor. Well, you don't put 13th, but you put 14th. So something like this, they would skip 41. And the story is that there were 42 people, but because of Porfirio Diaz's, because he was so powerful, they erased the name of his son-in-law from the story. But again, it was huge news in Mexico at the time. And this is the subject of our next lecture, so I'm not going to go into great detail here, just to say that, and I'll just say that Posada was very influential on the great masters who, after the revolution, received commissions to portray the history of Mexico. And these great muralists, including Diego Rivera here in a self-portrait as a child, Diego Rivera, David Siqueiros, and José Clemente Orozco, were very influenced by Posada's work. And one of the themes in these masters' work is the inclusion of indigenous peoples. And here we see in Dream of a Sunday Afternoon in the Alameda, Rivera is paying homage to Posada here holding a cane and in a suit, next to his famous creation, which Rivera called La Catrina, and Posada, La Garbancera Empolvada. Posada also influences the development of graphic arts in Mexico, and Leopoldo Méndez was very instrumental in this. Méndez is one of the founders of Mexico's Taller de Gráfica Popular, or TGP. They established it in 1937, and that's People's Graphic Workshop, and these are three of its founding members. And their objectives is to produce socially conscious art and make it accessible to everyone, just like Posada's artworks. Thank you for watching, and these are the works cited.